Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, a good few different styles, but I think it's fair to say that this brewery are best known for their New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. They're still a relatively new addition to the Scottish beer scene, but they are one of the most respected breweries in the country these days, and if you try their beer you'll definitely see why. But the one that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases. It had a little bit more of an unusual hop bill to it, so that really piqued my interest, and I have to say I'm quite curious to see how this one turns out. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head through to Glasgow once again, Yoker to be precise, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Overtone Brewing Co. So this particular beer is called Gold Dust. It comes in at 8.5% ABV and it's another New England hazy imperial double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released in December of 2021 and I bought this one at the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant through in Dunfermline, a new beer shop that's still kind of getting up and running, but he's always got a really good selection of Overtone in there. But yeah, this one should be really nice actually. I've heard good things about this beer. So let's crack on then and see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Overtone Brewing Company before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I am back home in the motherland of Scotland for a little while. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Overtone Brewing once again. So Overtone Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Glasgow in Yoker, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Bo Wang, who is originally from Beijing in China. So he had been a home brewer for a number of years before founding the brewery, and the name Overtone comes from Bo Wei's love of techno music, and that's the same reason that you get all these lovely kind of roundel and techno style artworks on these Overtone beers. But in the early days, Boway hired Dan Miller, who's from New Hampshire over in New England in the northeast of the US, to come in as his head brewer. But he had previously worked as a head chef and also as a brewer in England, New York, and also in Scotland for 6 Degrees North, a lovely little Belgian brewery who brew their beers in Lawrence Kirk. So do check them out if you get the chance. But also involved at the brewery is Martin Conahan, who worked in the craft beer scene down in New Zealand for quite a wee while. He sometimes takes part in the brewing, but he does a lot of other things kind of behind the scenes, if you like, as well. And these days they've also got Charlie, who is involved in the brewing team as well. But the brewery itself can be found in the New Albion Industrial Estate in Yoker, which is near Renfrew and Clydebank, kind of towards the west of the city actually, and they began their brewing operations there back in 2018. But this brewery don't have a fixed range of beers really, they're always brewing different things, and as of December 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced just over 60 different kinds of beer, but that's always on the increase. There's usually 2 beers at least released from these guys every week. Some of them are rebrews of course, but quite often there are new things being pumped out. They will tend to release a good 5 or 6 different beers every month actually. As I mentioned earlier, they are best known for their New England hazy IPAs, and that is the style that they are kind of their sort of business plan, I guess you could say, it is set around, in fact. But you will get other styles from these guys too. I've seen Hefeweizens, I've had a Pilsner from them before, I had a really nice double West Coast IPA from them. I thought that was really good, so I hope we see more of those. They do some really nice imperial stouts these days, and they are starting to experiment a little bit with barrel aging and sour beers. So yeah, just keep your eye out for all the different things that these guys are releasing. I still need to review one of the sours here on the channel for you, so we'll see about getting that sorted over the next little while. But yeah, definitely if you're into New England IPAs, then this is a brewery that you really want to check out. And when it comes to New England IPAs, these guys are doing pretty damn awesome stuff, actually. They were always well regarded here in Scotland, but they really started to get on the hype train, if you like, when their beers went down into England and they were compared to a lot of the breweries down there. But yeah, an awesome brewery and one that you definitely need to check out. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Overtone Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So just to let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up, as you can see, it's got that typical kind of roundel thing that you would expect of Overtone Brewing, and there you can see on the side here, Overtone Brewing Gold Dust, 8.5% ABV, 440 millilitres. Tells you on the back here, this one it says it's a double IPA, a tropical fruit salad with multiple layers of fresh pineapple and hints of orange peel, lemon zest and pine. So the hop profile on this one is Idaho 7, both in pellet form and in cryo, Brew 1, Equinol and Azaka. So yeah, we have encountered all of these hops before, but to have them all together is a little bit more unusual, and that was the main reason why I went for this one. It was a bit different from, you know, the usual Galaxy, Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic kind of thing. But yeah, Idaho 7, we know, American hop, 14% alpha acid, gives you some really lovely soft tropical notes. Brew 1 is an interesting one that you don't come across all that often these days. I think it's about 12-13% alpha acid, but it's known mainly for its big pineapple-y notes. Equinol was a lovely hop back in the day. I think that's about 14% alpha acid as well. American, big kind of limey character with that one, and Azaka is another American one, about 14% alpha acid, and mainly that gives you quite a bright tangerine orange from what I remember, but it's also got a good little bit of pineapple in it as well. So yeah, I have to say, I'm curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. As I mentioned earlier, this one came from the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant Dunfermline, and I think I paid about £6.50 for this can. So that translates to roughly about €7.50. I guess that's 75 Swedish kroner for those of you watching over there, and probably somewhere in the region of like $8.50 American, actually. So yeah, that gives you a price range if you're watching from other parts of the world. But yeah, 8.5% New England's double IPA, this one. It should be pretty nice, actually. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Gold Dust from Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker through in Glasgow. Let's take a look at this. Yeah. So I reviewed an Overtone beer on Christmas Day, but you know, I've got two IPAs sitting there and they're fairly new releases, so I kind of want to get those reviews just out there, actually. But yeah, these beers are always pretty nice, and you want to drink these IPAs, these New England IPAs, fairly fresh. When it comes to the New England ones, you want to give them about 2 weeks or so in the can, so they're not just overloaded with green component. But yeah, you do want to drink these fairly fresh, of course. But yeah, this one, I have to say, does look very, very nice. So as you can see, the head has faded away very quickly, actually, but it did pour with about 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. There's just a little kind of island of wisp, if you like, on the top of the beer there, but there's a nice kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass, and you can see it's quite small bubbles there, but it looks very good. You can see the colour of this beer. I think on the camera it's appearing a little bit brighter than it actually is, but to me it's appearing as a kind of soft, pale, sort of pineapple juice yellow colour. I always like comparing the colour of these New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's really just what they remind me of. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining the EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. And any adjuncts that you put in or any barrel aging that you do will also affect the colour too. But when it comes to IPAs, you don't really have to worry about those two variables. That is more applicable for different kinds of sour beer. But in terms of the level of haze on this one, it's kind of at the level you would expect for an 8.5% New Englander, but it still does look, it still looks pretty nice, actually. But there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, and if you shine the light through it, yeah, it is pretty opaque, but there is a bit of light just coming through on the side of the glass there. But yeah, I do think it looks, I think it does look pretty nice, actually, this one. But the level of haze in the beer, remember, depends on the oak content, the wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well. But in terms of appearance, there's nothing really unexpected about this beer, so I think we can move on to the aroma then. So let's have a little look at the aroma of this beer. Yeah, that's pretty nice. It is pretty damn good actually. So what I'm going to say about this one is that first off, I actually notice a little bit more of a kind of farmhousey character to this one compared to some of the other Overtone ones I've had. It does come across as being a wee bit more farmhousey. So I do wonder if they're using a slightly different yeast in this or something. It actually reminds me, the aroma of this beer reminds me of quite a few of the Apex Brewing beers that I've had from over in Sweden. So, I mean, they always, I think it's the WLP 66 yeast, the London Fog that they like to use. So I'm wondering if that's what they're using in here, because this beer really does, the backbone of this one has a really distinctive, more farmhousey character to it, which is interesting. But yeah, green component of this one is nice and soft, and you've also got a nice, just soft, tropical, fruity, juicy character coming out of this beer. So yeah, I really like how this one, I do really like how this beer goes about its business, that's for sure. So yeah, aroma wise, it is very, very nice actually. So yeah, let's just break that down for you a wee bit then. So the backbone of this beer is interesting. For me, I get a good little bit of a kind of crackery backbone, like a Jacob's cream cracker. I can smell quite a wee bit of that in there. There's definitely a wee bit of a more kind of bread crusty note as well, like a fresh hedgehog roll white bread crust. Some thicker white bread in there as well from the barley malt, and then you've got the wheat and the oats playing a role too. So for me, the wheaty character in this beer is actually quite smooth. There's a teeny little bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose, but overall I do find the wheat to be to be playing quite a smoothening effect in this beer, generally speaking. But on top of that, you've got the oats. And as I've told you before, when it comes to New England IPAs, oats are usually a very good indicator of how fresh the beer is. So yeah, when it comes to this one, this beer comes across with a really nice kind of creamy, smooth, oaty character. As the beer gets older, of course, you start to smell a little bit more of a kind of dry, powdery character out of the oats in these New England IPAs, and you don't get that in this one. It does come across as really smooth and quite creamy in a lot of ways. The other thing I'll say about this beer as well is that in the malt base, this one doesn't have such a big degree of sweetness actually. This one strikes me as being a little bit more kind of old school in a sense. If you go back, the first New England IPAs I encountered were the Swedish ones, of course, the O.O. Narangi, the Stigbergets, Amazing Haze, and also, you know, they had the GBG Beer Week 2016 beer at that time as well, and those ones, you know, they were, you know, straight up wheat, oats and barley malt. You know, they were that kind of smooth, bready, creamy sort of thing. The aroma of this beer really reminds me of those ones, because quite a few of the New England IPAs that you get today are a little bit kind of sweeter, if you like, and this whole farmhousey vibe that you're getting out of this one, the sort of crackery note, I've only really encountered that, as I say, with Apex Brewing Company in Sweden, but that doesn't really come out so much in the flavour. They do tend to lean a little bit more towards the wheaty, oaty, creamy side of things, to be honest with you. But yeah, the aroma that you get out of this beer on the malty and yeasty side of things is very, very nice actually. But remember, when it comes to New England IPAs, there's six different factors that we should consider: the farmhousey, yeasty side of things, the rye leaning grainy side of it, the wheaty bitiness, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and then also the kind of sweeter character as well. And quite often these beers will display a few of these characteristics, but the malty yeasty side of this one is quite interesting. And like I say, I think the crackery, the Jacob's cream crackery thing, strikes me as being a bit different with this one compared to some of the other Overtone ones that we've had in the past. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, green component on this beer is actually very, very soft. There's a little touch of earthiness to it, but to be honest with you, not a lot. You get a little bit of floral aromaticity there, but again, I think that takes a bit of a back seat, and for me, the green component is mainly like a wet, freshly cut grass. There's a lot of that coming out of this particular beer. So yeah, green component, little touch earthy, wee bit of a wet floral aromaticity, and also some nice, also a nice little bit of a kind of wet, freshly cut grass kind of thing. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, green component is as we would expect. So on the fruity side of things, again, it's a very soft, juicy one. This, and I think, to be honest, I think it's the Idaho 7 that really dominates the character in this one. So for me, I get a lot of juicy mango out of this. There's a bit of juicy mango and a bit of a lighter kind of dried apricot character in there. Definitely some soft pineapple as well. The pineapple, of course, is going to come from the brew one, but I think the kind of more juicy, smooth characters, the apricot and things, I think they dominate a wee bit, but the pineapple takes a wee bit of time to kind of come out of the beer, to be honest with you. You do get, on the very tip of the nose, at the very front of the nose, you will get a wee bit of the lime from the Equinaut, but I don't get so much of the kind of orangey character from the Azaka, and that's kind of interesting. I would have expected a wee bit more of that. So yeah, there is maybe just a teeny little bit of that orange, but yeah, not a lot for me. This beer really leans towards the kind of soft, get a lot of soft apricot out of this, definitely a wee bit of juicy mango, a lot of pineapple, definitely a lot of pineapple, both from the Idaho 7 and from the brew one in this, and I think Azaka, like I say, can contribute to that. But yeah, just a wee touch of lime and maybe a wee bit of orange underneath. But overall, the fruity characters in this one are very, very soft and juicy. They're not overly sort of pungent, if you like. So it's quite an interesting beer from that particular perspective. So yeah, as I always say, just pay a little bit of attention to that, and just pay a little bit of attention to that and see what you think. But to me, this is a really soft, kind of old school, bready, fruity, juicy New England IPA. So yeah, let's put a little bit of this, let's get the rest of it in the glass, and we'll have a taste of this one then. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it's time that we have a taste of this. So yeah, this one is the Gold Dust 8.5% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker through in Glasgow. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty damn good actually. Just really smooth, drinkable, creamy, juicy IPA. Like I said, this one is a little bit more akin to the more old school ones that I had back in 2015, 2016, something like that. It is a wee bit more like those than the big kind of sweet ones that you're getting today. But yeah, it really does remind me of some of the Apex brewing beers. I'd love to see Overtone and Apex do a collaboration together. That would be really interesting actually. Maybe that's something for the future. But yeah, that's a really good one actually. This is one of these beers, I think it'll grow on you the more that you drink it. But yeah, this kind of, it does have a little bit of a different vibe to it, this, compared to the other Overtones that I've had. This one does strike me, I have had ones from Overtone that are a bit more old school like this. And I think that's the thing with trying these Overtone beers. They are all a little bit different. So they're not just playing around with the hops and changing the hops. They are playing around with different yeasts and different, oat ratios, wheat ratios, all of these kind of things. They're really playing around with these beers quite a little bit. But this one is really nice, and I like it just because of that. It's got a little bit of that nostalgic feel to it because of that more old school, bready, smooth, creamy approach. So a big thumbs up to Overtone Brewing once again with this. This is absolutely lovely. So let's try and break this one down for you as we always do and just describe it a wee bit more in depth. So on the malty side of things then, so middle third of your palate, so backbone of this beer, you do get a wee bit of that kind of Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, but on top of that you've also got a bit of that bread crust, and the bread crusty character is a wee bit more grainy than the Aroma would have you believe. So yeah, definitely a wee bit more of a kind of grainy character coming out of this beer, but I like that. I do like that about this one. But on top of that, you're getting a lot of white bread. So for me, on top of the bread crusty layer, there's a nice kind of thick but quite dense white bready barley malt layer in this. I do find the bready characteristics quite dense. Then on top of that you're getting the wheat, and the wheat really does kind of thicken the beer out, and it almost kind of squashes all these layers together. The cream cracker, the bread crust, the white bread, and then the wheat. So there's quite a lot of that coming out in this one for sure. So yeah, on the, how do we say, on top of the wheat though, you do get the kind of oaty character there, but I think the oat takes a bit of a back seat in this beer, to be honest with you. So down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel the sort of smooth oat, and it does give you a wee bit of creaminess actually. And as you move out towards the sides of your palate, you can feel you get a little bit more of that kind of powdery, oaty sort of thing to this one. But there's not a lot of sweetness to this beer, as I said, and at 8.5%, this one is kind of pushing the edge, I think, of what you can do with the old school New England IPAs. I used to talk about this in some of my earlier New England IPA reviews. Like, I think when you got to 8% with these beers, you needed to start thinking about putting a malt in it that had a bit of biscuit or a bit of brown sugar or something like that in the beer, just to cover the alcohol a little bit. So you can feel that a wee bit with this one. This beer, you can feel a wee bit of that booziness in the middle of your palate. So you've just got a wee circle in the dead centre of your tongue where the alcohol comes out of this beer actually. And because this one, I think this one doesn't have like a bit of golden promise or a bit of Cara Munich or crystal or something like this that just has that sweet edge to it. I think this one doesn't really have that. So you can feel the booziness in this beer a little bit more, I think, but it's not overly obvious. And the other thing is, this beer is a double IPA. You don't want a double, for me at least, you don't want a double IPA that's just ridiculously drinkable, that drinks like a pale ale. For me, if I'm going to drink a double IPA, I want to know it's a double IPA. So in a sense, I think that's good that it shows a little bit of booziness and lets you know that it is a double, it's not a pale ale or whatever. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. But I think that kind of describes everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate in this one. So yeah, bit of Jacob's cream cracker, bread crust, white bread, the wheat really thickens it out. Then on top of that, you've got the kind of oaty notes there, a little bit drier out towards the edge of the palate, and a wee bit of booziness in the dead centre of the tongue as well. But yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business for sure. It gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, on the I think we can move on and have a little look at the back third of your palate then. So on the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. There's a nice wee bit of a bready bread crust sort of thing. Base of the back third of your palate, you have a little bit of, you do have a little bit of that more grainy bread crusty quality. On top of that, there's a wee bit more of a kind of white bready. Yeah, there is a wee bit more of that kind of white bready sort of thing as well. So it's a little bit more, that the graininess of the beer does come out there a little bit too, but then you can feel that this beer actually, I think the further you go into the aftertaste with it, it really starts to lean a little bit more towards the wheaty, bitey side of things. So if you're comparing it to some of these American ones, I think this beer would be a little bit more like a kind of Trillium New England IPA, a little bit more wheaty and bitey. Yeah, so the wheaty bitiness I think does gain prominence the further you go into this beer. But like I say, a bit of a more grainy bread crusty note, thicker white bready character than that nice big wheaty bitey character sitting on top of that. But on top of this, on top of that wheaty layer, you can definitely get a little bit of the yeast. So you've got a wee bit of a kind of grainy, bready, yeasty character to this one as well, which I think comes out of it. So you can feel the yeasty character in this beer is a little bit more kind of condensed together. So you get a nice little bit of condensed, that bready character just condensing together some really nice bready, like a little bit of like an almost peppery spice to it actually. So yeah, a bit of a more dense, bready, yeasty kind of character, a bit of a peppery sort of thing to it. And yeah, I think that does work really nicely in this beer for sure. But yeah, on top of I think in the back third of the palate, what you'll notice is the flavour is definitely taller. So yeah, you get a nice big kind of tall flavour on the back third of your palate. As you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit, and as you go into the middle third of your palate, it squashes together just that little bit more. So yeah, the malty and yeasty side of things in this beer is a little bit more, yeah, it does go together really quite nicely. And as I say, this beer just strikes me as being a lot more old school than some of the other Overtone ones that we've had, but again, they show off the diversity of the style really well actually. So yeah, this is, yeah, really reminds me of Amazing Haze, Narangi, things like that actually. So really nicely done. Thumbs up to Overtone. Let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a wee touch of earthiness out of this one, definitely. As you move further forward, it gets a little bit herbal, but then as you move towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you do get a nice little bit of a kind of dank floral aromaticity. It actually does have a good wee bit of dankness to it, this beer. So maybe there's a wee bit more early edition hop in this one. It does strike me as being a wee bit more bitter, this beer, but all of the hops that you have in this one, they are quite high alpha acid, so if you add them during the early stage of the wort boil, you will get a fair bit of floral aromaticity and dankness and things like that. So remember, early edition hops are the ones that give you most of the bitterness. These are most common in West Coast IPAs, of course, but then late edition hops are common in both West Coast and New England. So they give you a little bit of bitterness, but quite a bit of flavour and aroma. And then dry hopping gives you completely flavour and aroma. It's not really in it. They won't give you much in the way of bitterness, but New England IPAs tend to only use late edition and dry hopping, but some of them do use a little bit of early edition hopping as well. So yeah, this one for me does have a nice little bit of floral aromatic dankness to it, so I wonder if there has been a wee bit of late edition, there has been a wee bit of early edition hop in this one, because the dankness really lingers there. But round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and grassy, and the grassiness has a wee touch of zestiness to it, but for me it's quite a wet grassiness there. So you've got quite a contrast just existing within that green component of the beer, but I like it. Definitely like it. So let's focus on the front third of the palate then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up there, nice wee bit of bread crust, and the base of that front third of the palate has a little bit of bread crust and a wee bit of white bread in there for sure. But yeah, I do like how that goes together in this one. And on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer is pretty nice actually, and it's quite interesting. It's actually got a very good balance between the more kind of citrusy, zesty side of things and the kind of softer, tropical, fruity side. So yeah, I really like how this one goes about its business. So let's break that down for you as well. So for me, at the back of that front third of your palate, there is a wee bit of a strong kind of pungent passion fruit there, but as you move further forward, you get a bit of the juicier mango, and then you can feel the nice soft apricot flavours in there. I think all of that is coming from the Idaho 7, but then as you reach that middle part of your palate, you definitely get a wee bit more of the kind of pineapple-y qualities there. So there's a lot of pineapple. That'll be the Brew 1, and it'll also be the Idaho 7, and potentially the Azaka to a point. But as soon as you cross the border into that front half of the front third of your palate, this beer really does become, quite it becomes quite citrusy and citricy and zesty in a lot of ways. So yeah, the way that goes together in this beer, I think, is very nice. I mean, the Azaka really comes out in the flavour, so you can get a little bit of that quite pungent mandarin-y orange. I always remember Azaka was a wee bit, it can give you quite a strong tangerine, pungent-y mandarin quality, and I'm getting a lot of that in this beer. But as you move towards the very kind of front tip of your palate, there's a little bit more of that kind of oily, there's a wee bit more of that kind of oily, limey character from the Equinox. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes together in that sense. It really leans towards the kind of the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, it really leans towards that more pungent, citrusy, zesty side of the fruity spectrum. But it says on the back here, lemon zest and orange peel. I get the orangey character out of it. Not so much the lemon zest. I think it's quite a dark, limey character in there, but the piney character in this one I would agree with actually. It's got this big dank character, and it feels a little bit more bitter as well. This one compared to some of the other New England doubles that we've had from Overtone. So I like this one. I would love to see them do a few more West Coast IPAs. The Kanye West one that they did, I've reviewed that maybe about a year and a half ago, something like that. That was lovely. So I'd love to see these guys do a few more West Coast IPAs. A black IPA from Overtone I think would be a really interesting proposition as well. So I hope they look at that at some point in the future. But yeah, this is a really, really nice New England IPA. This one definitely more dank and bitter and things like that than some of the other ones we've had, and definitely a bit more citrusy and zesty too. But I think that describes everything that covers everything that we really need to say about this beer. So yeah, just really, really nicely done. So yeah, Lovely stuff, and again, big thumbs up to Overtone Brewing for this one. Let's round off the review with a look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, mouthfeel wise, this one is very, very nice. I would say that it's leaning toward the top end of mid-bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a big kind of sort of creamy, oily mouthfeel to it. So I really do like how that goes together. So yeah, nice big kind of creamy, oily mouthfeel, and yeah, I think that works for it for sure. In terms of IBUs, I think this one's a bit higher. I wouldn't be surprised if this one's a 50 or 60 IBU beer. It does feel a little bit more bitter there, which is nice. I've missed the bitterness in the beers. A lot of them are just, creamy and juicy these days, but it's nice to have a wee bit of variety. The malt base, as we said, has a wee bit of graininess to it, a lovely bit of smoothness. Not so much in the way of sweetness. This is a more old school New England IPA for me than the fruity side of things. You've got an interesting balance between the kind of softer tropical side of things and also a more pungent, zesty, citrusy character. But yeah, you do have I think the things that linger into the aftertaste for this one would be the lime, kind of the mandarin-y orange, and also a bit of the more pungent passion fruit. So yeah, this is a really quite interesting beer and quite different from the other ones that I can remember having had from Overtone Brewing Company. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This beer is definitely worth trying because it's a wee bit different from a lot of other New England IPAs I've had recently. So yeah, this one was the Gold Dust, coming in at 8.5% ABV, a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Overtone Brewing Company in Yoker through in Glasgow. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Overtone Brewing Company, and we will return to these guys again at some point soon. I do have another IPA from these guys sitting in the fridge, and it is supposed to be very, very good actually, so I'm curious to see what that one's going to have in store for us. But thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Overtone's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.